This is Pete Fletcher. On a special year-end episode of Around the Galaxy, I'm joined by special co-host Nick Mielke when we talk about your predictions and ours for Book of Boba Fett. And it's amazing how little we know. It's been a year, and in a world full of leaks, we know nothing.
You're listening to Around the Galaxy.
Welcome to episode number 148 of Around the Galaxy, the Star Wars fan talk show. I am your host, Pete Fletcher. Thank you so much for joining us. If this is your first visit with Around the Galaxy, well, thank you so much for checking us out. So glad you could join us. If you're a return visitor, well, let me just give you a little advance warning. This show's a little bit different than what you might be used to. Every week, we bring you one-on-one interviews with the people behind the fandom, and sometimes it's Star Wars authors or actors or special effects artists or social media voices or podcasters. And this week is going to be a little bit different. We are actually taking some time to dig in to the upcoming Disney Plus Star Wars series, Book of Boba Fett. And I am joined by my good friend, and this week he's a co-host, Mr. Nick Mielke of Podcast to the Wills. You know, back at the beginning of December, we threw a little bit of a challenge out on social media, said, hey, what do you expect to see on the upcoming Disney Plus series, Book of Boba Fett? What do you want to see? What are your theories? What are some crazy ideas that you might have about the show? And hey, you came through with flying colors, and you gave us a whole bunch of things to talk about. We also share some of our perspectives and things that we'd like to see, but we're really excited to bring you this slightly different type of show. If you are a new listener and you're not subscribed, now would be a great time to hit that subscribe button, because not only do you get Around the Galaxy every week, but on the weekends, we bring you a show called Disturbances in the Force, where we bring you all the latest Star Wars news. We say, give us 5 minutes, and we'll give you the galaxy. And we do. We bring you all the news from the week with no spin, no clickbait, just all the straight talk from all the things that are happening in the Star Wars universe. Also, if you get a chance, please follow us on all your social media channels like TikTok or Facebook or Instagram, or mostly I spend a lot of the time on Twitter, and you can find us at ATGcast. Also, hey, head over to our website, atgcast.com, for information about the show, ways to order some of our really cool merch, or become a part of the Around the Galaxy family as a member of our Patreon program.
Hey, Pete, I was hoping, listen.
Okay, hey, man.
Hi, everybody. I'm ATG3. Yeah. Yes, I am the droid. I usually read reviews, but, this week, Pete, I have a little bit of a bone to pick with you.
What happened? What did I do?
Well, you did this prediction show, and you didn't even ask me for my opinion.
Well, I mean, I didn't know if you had anything, or if you had strong opinions.
Okay, can I give you some of my predictions, and you can tell me, do you think it's realistic or possible?
Is there any chance I can stop you?
No, probably not.
Okay, well then.
Okay.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. Okay, my first prediction for Book of Boba Fett, starting on December 29th on Disney Plus.
Yeah, no, we don't need to give all the detail. We don't work for Disney.
We're not shills. We don't get paid.
No,
everybody on social media says we are.
No, I know, but we're not.
Okay.
No, just.
All right, well, check it out whenever you want. I don't care.
Okay.
My first prediction is that we will see a battle droid.
Do you think so?
Finally get the representation that it deserves. Of all the character sets in the Star Wars universe, the battle droid has taken the hardest hit. Do you know what happened to battle droids when the Clone Wars ended?
I have no idea.
Yeah, no, I didn't think so.
Okay.
Some of them took some pretty crummy jobs, like me. I mean, look, I'm stuck on a podcast and reading reviews.
You don't have to do this.
I mean, getting even like top billing.
No, I mean,
I see your picture all over the place. I don't see anything with me.
Well, no, you're on a T-shirt.
There's the T-shirt that you can buy by visiting ATG.
Right, there you go.
I keep trying. I am not a sales bot for sure.
No, you're not.
Okay, well, we'll be here with our Boba Fett predictions after these messages.
Nick, how are you?
What's up?
We want to talk about the Book of Boba Fett.
We do.
And first of all, were you a Boba Fett fan as a kid growing up in your Star Wars journey? Was Boba Fett kind of on your radar or not really?
Not especially. He was I mean, and I grew up with the original trilogy. Those were my movies. We've talked about this 100 times. Mm-hmm. But Boba Fett, like, he was cool. And I think it's in that Disney Plus special that came out a few weeks back that was, you know, the Under the Helmet or whatever it was called. Mm-hmm. You know, they say in there kind of up front, they're like, it's the helmet. Like, that helmet, like, he was cool from the beginning.
Right.
But I was never obsessed with him. I was never, you know, like, I need more of that. He didn't say very much. He looked cool. And because I was always a diehard, you know, rebel supporter.
Right.
I was like, yeah, he died in kind of a punky way. Like, he got hit by blind Han Solo, crashed into a thing and rolled into a belching Sarlacc. But yeah, he never really stuck out over the years. I never really made an effort to collect Boba things. It was not, you know, it's just like, oh yeah, Boba, cool. And I was honestly always more fascinated with the cult following that Boba garnered over all these years than I was with the character itself.
That's a fair observation. Yeah, it is interesting. There's always been sort of this cult of Boba Fett, and I'd love to say that I was, you know, a huge Boba Fett fan. I think I was like, if 90% of the fan base is being honest, they all were just like you, like, hey, he looks cool. Right. There's something cool about him. He fits so easily and so nicely into a part of the Star Wars universe. You did want to know more about him, but if you didn't, it was all right. And that was actually kind of one of the interesting things about him, you know, so.
Well, and we were always told that he was the most feared bounty hunter in the galaxy.
Right.
But all we got was him posing and looking cool and then dying in a punk way. Like, we didn't get that. So I think the pivot from there is when we get his return in season 2 of The Mandalorian and we see, even without the armor, oh crap, this might be what they were talking about.
Right. Yeah. I think you're right. I think that was one of the amazing things. I'm sorry, I'm pulling up some notes here. I think that was one of the amazing things about the episode, The Tragedy, when he arrived and just, I mean, he was brutal. I mean, if you think about what we'd seen on, and maybe that's an interesting observation broadly as I'm thinking out loud about it, the Mandalorian as a series has been a little bit more subtly more brutal than anything we've ever seen in Star Wars. The very first scene, he slices a Quarren dude in half. Like, you don't see it, of course, and that's pretty brutal. The way Boba Fett came at those stormtroopers, it smashed armor and just came at him with a fury. We've never seen that kind of, all out sort of barbarian kind of approach to a battle in any Star Wars.
And with a gaffy stick, no less. I mean,
exactly.
It was, we heard it, and that was the weapon of the Tusken Raiders, but this figure showed up, and and of course we know that part of that is a tribute to, or not a tribute, but can be attributed to Robert Rodriguez and directing that episode. And that was another thing that was so fun about that episode, was how different it felt, and those jump cuts and action sequences made it that much more just special and unique, and really showed you the power and the weight. And we got things like the knee rocket when he finally got the armor back, and we're like, oh crap, that's a thing.
Yep. And that episode, I went back and rewatched it, of course, because the show's coming next week. But when you realize how much, and actually everything with every episode of Mandalorian, but that one in particular, how much is jam-packed into, was it like 42 minutes, whatever it is. You got suddenly all the questions we had about Boba Fett. Is he Mandalorian? Is he not? How does that work? Was, all that stuff came to light. And then within that episode, you went from, fearing him to almost sympathizing with him. And that's amazing. And I think that's a tribute to Rodriguez, what he did with that. Right. And it also gave me my favorite shot in all of The Mandalorian, which is when Fennec is going backwards off that cliff and just firing away in slow motion. It's just that I love that scene. That's one of my favorite things. I wrote a piece for Beyond the Blast Doors about a year ago when we first heard that Boba Fett was coming back, with sort of 10 facts. Maybe we'll throw some in as we go.
Yeah.
One of the things to think about And one of the reasons we're talking today is because we've had a year to think about this show. It's hard to believe it was over a year ago. I think it was on Sunday that it was the 1 year anniversary of the final episode, which everybody always talks about, the Luke Skywalker return, which is incredible. And everybody also talks about that ending. And those were in the same episode. The return of Boba Fett to Jabba's palace and the return of Luke Skywalker. It's pretty incredible. But we don't know a lot about the series, and that's why we asked you on December 8th to start, give us some of your crazy ideas and things you want to see and things that you're excited about. And we'll get to those in a minute, but I want to just lay out for you and get your thoughts on the things the only things we know for sure about the show. And it's amazing how little we know. It's been a year, and in a world full of leaks, in a world where Spider-Man No Way Home, basically all the surprises were ruined before you walked in the door. We know nothing. And incredibly, we read very recently, I think it was Favreau who said that they were able to talk Disney Plus Disney to hold back the announcement from the shareholders day, which tells you a lot about the play that Favreau has there. But the only thing we know for sure is that Rodriguez told us that the only thing we've seen so far is from the first few minutes of the episode. And that's pretty exciting. Of the first episode. They can't share anything.
First half of the first episode.
Right. The first half of the first episode is the only thing we've seen so far.
Correct.
We know that they can't share anything else because each episode is, quote, full of big surprises, which is very exciting. The second half of the season allegedly is epic. Who knows what that's going to be all about. And Rodriguez also went on record as saying that the show over delivers, which is a very dangerous statement in today's.
That's a bold move.
Yeah. What, of all those things, what's the thing that's kind of most surprising to you that we've heard?
Well, I really liked, and you hit on part of it where they talked about that they talked them into not including an investor day last year, which was December the 10th. And we got all the big info about Kenobi and all those things that were going to be coming up. But the other thing that was in that Hollywood Reporter article that I thought was really fascinating was how, even though kind of along those same lines, only the highest of the highest up, the ones that approved their ability to make that show, even knew that trailer was coming at the end of season 2. Like, there were tons of people that had worked on the show or was lots of Disney brass didn't know that was coming. And so for them to give Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau that kind of leeway is really impressive. And I think that certainly attributes to their ability to keep it secret, like you said, and their ability to, hold things back. And I've said, and I think you and I even texted about this when that first trailer dropped, I only need enough in a trailer to let me know it's still coming.
Yes. Yep.
I don't want all the details. That's why I'm watching the show.
Yes. Yep.
And so I love, I went and saw Spider-Man, this last weekend when it came out. And I've loved over the last several years, and Marvel does it well. Marvel does it well. Star Wars does it well, even though we complain about how we didn't get a Kenobi trailer, how we didn't get a whatever.
Right.
But they do a really good job. I think back to Mandalorian season 2 and the trailers that we got for that.
Right.
Those trailers were primarily like the first 1 or 2 episodes at the most.
Well, think about the trailers for the first season. They had to withhold 7.6 episodes worth of Baby Yoda.
Correct.
They were able to show us nothing.
So I like that. And I like that they're able to control the secrets and the leaks and the narrative so that we get to come in and have a pure experience, that we get to come in and really enjoy, taking it all in. And now I am also very intrigued by the inflating the expectations ahead of time. Again, in a culture where all you have to do is make one person mad on the internet and the whole world catches on fire.
Right.
That it's a bold move to say, we're going to blow your mind, because if you don't, somebody's going to pitch a fit about it.
Correct. Yep. before we go to our first prediction that we got a couple weeks ago, let me see if you know the answer to this little trivia question. The original voice of Boba Fett was obviously very different, and actually I kind of miss it. I mean, I love Tamora Morrison is amazing, but I do kind of miss that original voice. Do you know which classic television sitcom the guy who was the voice, a guy named Jason Wingreen, do you know what show he had a part on? I didn't tell you I was going to give you trivia, so I apologize in advance.
I like the challenge. I'm going to say, was it Bonanza?
No, but that would make sense based on his age. But he was the voice, or he was the bartender, Harry Snowden, in Archie Bunker's Place and All in the Family. So there you go. Okay. So that's that. Yeah. There's just useless trivia, things that
that's the high quality people come here for.
Well, I'll tell you, this is just proof that my brain is starting to rot a little bit, because ordinarily I probably would have remembered that, but I had to look at my notes down here. I'm not going to lie. So
that's okay.
But
that's a good one. I like that.
It is kind of cool. And now I kind of want to go back and watch Archie Bunker's Place, although I wonder if it's if it still is any good. So I'm going to share, if I did this right, I'm going to see if I can share the very first comment that I got from from my followers about what their prediction or what they'd like to see, one of their fan theories. And so here it is. This one came from Stephen Kent, who was a guest of ours earlier this year, and just came out with his book, How the Force Can Fix the World. And it's seriously, and I'm not saying this because he was on the show. Oh, it's so good. It really, for honestly, as you guys probably know, I'm a little bit more center or left leaning, but he's a little right leaning, and but he takes these life lessons from Star Wars and just applies them, and they're so cool. But what Steven said here was there's going to be some kind of connection that'll be made straight to Omega. What do you think? Do you think we're going to see that much of a direct connection? Do you think the timing of Bad Batch was such that they're trying to bring that connection? What are your thoughts? Do you think we'll see anything about Omega?
I think I would be, first of all, before I get to that, I have to say I live in such a notification silencing culture and state of life that when you had that tweet up on the screen and it said there were 7 notifications, my first instinct was to click on them to see what they were included.
I have to tell you, I was too like, you know what? I'll just pause the show. I got to check out what are people.
Right, I need to see what this is. I would be foolish to rule out the possibility of some sort of direct Omega connection, but it has not been something of all the different things that I've kind of played out in my mind. It has not been in the top half of my list. So I'm going to say with something like that, I could almost see it being more dialogue only.
Yeah.
It seems unlike, and again, anything's possible. It seems unlikely that they cast a grown-up Omega to show up and, have a role and pop in there and, be cutesy with a bow and arrow or whatever.
Right.
But I could see it certainly being some sort of mention, again, if we're getting we'll get into this in a minute with one of my ideas. I could see it being a part of a story he tells somewhere to someone.
Yeah. Yeah. I would be surprised if we see her, for 2 reasons. I wouldn't rule out a quick mention, but I'm even going to put that a little bit on the side for two reasons. One is, I still feel like, they're going to be creating the Boba Fett story here, and they're going to need to really focus on that. It is only 7 episodes. Yeah. So they're really going to need to focus on that unless she is a driving part of it. But the reason I don't think she will be is because Bad Batch has season 2 coming, and they need to. Nobody expects to see a dead Omega, right? Let's be realistic here. Yeah. However, they do need to leave a little bit of mystery as to where she is and what happens. And even if we see she's become, a rebel spy, or she's become a mercenary, or she's become, a dirt merchant in Tatooine. Right. I don't think we're ready to know what the end of her story is. I do feel like there's a good possibility that we could get just a passing mention, like Fennec saying something like, well, that's, like your sister, or just something like that to kind of throw a passing glance at it. But I don't really think that we will get her in this specifically. So.
Okay, so let me pivot off that. I'm gonna throw it back at you because now we have dueling hosts going on here.
I love it.
Kind of like last weekend. So if it's not going to be Omega, who do you predict would be a character from animation that does show up in Book of Boba Fett?
That's I would love to see Rex, because I really thought there was a chance we were going to get Rex in Mandalorian. When we first heard that Tamora Morrison was back, in fact, my first thought was they're trying to put us off the scent, and we're going to see Ahsoka and Rex together. The reason I think I'd like to see Rex, and I think there's a decent chance that we could see Rex, is because I think it might close the loop on the cloning thing. I think we could. I think we could see Boba Tamora as Jango as well in some sort of a flashback. But I do think we're going to need, I think Book of Boba Fett being only 7 episodes, and I think we've heard it's a limited series, right? Yes, it is
a limited.
Yeah. And it's going to be a part of the bigger picture. I think they are going to have to close some things for Boba Fett, and having some closure on his clone brothers, I think would make a lot of sense. I think that would be kind of cool to see.
Yeah. One of my notes was asking the question, do we think we might get Tamora doing double duty, playing Boba and being a clone of some sort? So I think that plays perfectly in there. I think the other two most ready candidates for an animated transition, of course, we could get a peek at Sabine leading up to the Ahsoka series, because that has been cast. Yeah. And for me, that would continue the thread of these series kind of pointing the way along the way. We get Bo showed up in Mandalorian, Ahsoka shows up in Mandalorian. We know there's an Ahsoka series coming, so it could be one of the connecting points.
Yep.
I think the other one that I would be super excited to see them do would be Cad Bane.
Yes,
a live action Cad Bane, and I think I put this in our little group text a while back. I actually want Timothy Oliphant to play Cad Bane as well as Cobb Vanth.
I think that'd be great,
because I think he's the tall, lean gunslinger. He's done it in Deadwood. He's done it, in these other places. I think that would be a fun little nod for him to be in some makeup doing that.
I think you're right. I actually think, I'm surprised my brain didn't go there, because I would love to see that. I mean, you recall a year ago when this first happened, there were, me and Dave Amilati were talking about, we'd love to see them bring Cad Bane back. And then when he came back in Bad Batch, I feel like that kind of, much like we got introduced to Omega, and I don't think we'll see her in Book of Boba Fett. I think bringing Cad Bane back was deliberate to kind of remind people that he's still out there. And I think that that's a real good possibility. Wow, man. Yeah, I would say that there's a good chance on that. Tamora Morrison could conceivably play any clone. They could make up a clone. Absolutely. But so I think I could see it. I could see it being, a clone. And I'm going to go so far as to say I'd be surprised if we don't see him in clone armor or some sort of clone connection at some point.
Flashback or modern day, quote unquote, modern day, either one.
Yep. Well, let me ask you, you were leaning toward what one of your predictions was. Let me hear what you got.
Well, I think I've said what what was the question? Oh, Omega. I think with Omega, it is dialogue and it's mentioned. I have a bunch of different things that I've got on here. The first thing that I put, and this kind of feeds into no matter what the predictions are, we've gotten in the first 2 seasons of Mandalorian, all of those different episodes are listed as chapters. Chapter 1, Chapter 2, Chapter 3. This series is literally titled The Book of Boba Fett. And one of my sincere hopes for this series is that we get a non-linear story. Yeah. And that each episode is a chapter of the Book of Boba Fett. And so I could see the first episode being him escaping from the Sarlacc, him returning to Jabba's palace to find it empty or overrun.
Yep.
Obviously when he shows up at the end of Mandalorian in that footage, there had been some time passed because he had been without his armor. Bib Fortuna is sitting in the chair.
Right.
The chair is actually different, which we talk so much about the throne of Jabba the Hutt, and we get all, the Christmas ornament with Boba sitting on the throne.
Right.
There's no way Jabba the Hutt ever sat in that chair.
That is not Jabba's throne. That's a great point.
He sat on a platform, but I think, one of the things that I would really be excited to see is for it to jump around to some different things, and that would allow them to utilize possibly flashbacks, to utilize, even, do we get a flashback to Daniel Logan as a younger Boba Fett?
Oh, yeah.
Showing up to do something.
That would be great.
I think that's one of the things that I'd love to see is just for them to really lean into. We're telling the story of the greatest bounty hunter in the galaxy because we've always been told that's what he is, and now you get to see it play out, not necessarily in a connect episode 1 to episode 7 type of way.
And I will say this too, and I think very funny. Michael says Jabba had the throne in his Peloton days. Hey, there was a ripped hut in the comic book, the Bounty Hunter comic book, that I would love to say I read a lot but didn't. I think you're right, and I think my biggest theory is that this is setting up Boba Fett to be part of this culmination of the story. And if you think about it, we have seen my prediction when I first heard the name The Mandalorian, and after we saw the Darksaber appear at the end of the first season, my prediction kind of got solidified, and that was that it's about the Mandalorian, not a Mandalorian, the Mandalorian, the one who's going to go back and rule Mandalore. But I think this is going to set it up so that when Boba Fett makes his play for Mandalore, when Bo-Katan makes her play for Mandalore, and Sabine makes her play for Mandalore, we're going to see sort of a four stories come together in this epic sort of struggle to take over Mandalore, because you have very different types of people. You have somebody like Bo-Katan who believes she is the heiress. She is the rightful owner. You have Sabine who's been there, who gave it up and may regret it now, right? Now that she handed that off. You have Din, who is like, I don't even know if I belong here.
He doesn't even know what Mandalore is.
Yeah, he doesn't even know what a Jedi is, which is just, I love that about
He's still wrestling with the whole taking the hat off thing.
That's right. And then you have Boba Fett, who all we know is that he truly is Mandalorian, although maybe not by blood, but we know that he's definitely Mandalorian. He's got the chain code. So he probably feels like he's got some sort of rightful say. And so I think that's why there's actually some point to this lunacy. That's why I think this is giving you his story. He'll disappear until the big epic finale, but this is him setting himself up so that he's prepared to go for the ruler of Mandalore to really take his own rightful spot. So
I'm going to throw a small wrench into that theory.
Yeah.
I like the idea. I like the contention. And I think that's, at one point that feels like what they're pointing us towards with Mandalorian season 3, especially if for the time being Grogu's out of the picture. It ends with, Din has the Darksaber, but obviously Bo's, upset about that. Here's where I think I see that being slightly different than your vision of it, which is I think and this is my big one. I think by the end of Book of Boba Fett, I think Boba dies.
Ooh.
He essentially endorses Din because maybe Din shows up to help him with something at the end of this series we're about to get. And as a result of Boba dying, Din ends up with Boba's starship just in time to start Mandalorian season 3. Because obviously there's a vacuum of him not having a ship after the Razor Crest was blown up. He spent the last couple of episodes of Mando season 2 flying around with Boba.
Yep.
So I could see it being he's the one with integrity. He's the one that I think should be doing this. He has the ship, and I don't know. I feel like maybe this is a coda for Boba Fett for over all these years.
It could very well be.
We get a series to wrap up instead of him disappearing to be Thanos in the background for another couple of seasons until it all swirls together.
I like that, actually. I think that's just like I think Hawkeye is going to retire after tomorrow's episode. Now, when this drops next week, I will have been proven wrong. But let me share another prediction that kind of plays off what you're saying, but I think it's a really interesting one. It's one that I didn't think about. And it's, like all of these, we're all probably wrong, but it's worth taking a quick look at. Alexander says at Ella Jawa or El Jawa says Boba Fett isn't actually Boba Fett. It's a clone impersonating him after he died in Return of the Jedi. Now, while I think that's very unlikely, I do feel like there is it would be interesting to see that as kind of something that plays out, because it could be the age difference, I think, is what kind of kills that, but it does. Right. It kind of does play with what you're saying about the death of Boba Fett, and in a way, it's sort of like you have so many different Marvel heroes who Batman comes to mind, who has people who work for him or with him and kind of do what he needs done, and Robin or whatever, or so that's an interesting concept. I like the idea, sort of, as Michael was saying here, the Dread Pirate Roberts, exactly. And all the clones just keep on coming. But what do you think of that? What's the likelihood of that, in your opinion, you think?
That doesn't seem as likely because, like you said, it feels a little more... There's a lot of more hoops we have to jump through to get to that, as far as, well, I'm not really him, but I have his memories, or I'm not really him, but I still ended up with his ship and recognized his armor, or it's fun, but it gets a little more into maybe that's a what if Star Wars proposition.
Yeah. No, I like that. I think that would be a cool
what if Boba Fett was not the original Boba Fett.
Yep. Well, and again, even Boba Fett with, what was it? Talent? No, who was the somebody in the chat will know if we don't. The guy who masqueraded as Boba Fett, and not the Marshal, but there was another guy in the comics, and I can't remember who it was. So
I don't know the name either.
It's a really interesting kind of concept. I'm sure somebody in the comments will know, but that would be a really interesting thing. To say, it'd be kind of a twist. I think it's a little bit too twisty. I think it's the kind of thing that people would kind of be like, really? Is that the way we're going to go? But I do think it's a possibility, just simply because of the clone thing. And I love that the comment. One of my favorite lines in The Mandalorian was when he said, "They'll recognize my face." I thought that was was great. This is another one that I think this will lead to some conversation. So let me pull it up here. This one came to us from Tatooine Sons, my good buddies over there. They say, and this opens a whole can of worms, that the true villain of the series is Kira in Crimson Dawn. Let's talk about that as a concept, and then let's talk about the role you think that Crimson Dawn will play, if any, in Book of Boba Fett.
I think this is entirely plausible, and especially if it does stick with a 7 linear episode story instead of my jump around different chapters deal.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we've seen, and I don't remember if it was in the Hollywood Reporter article or if it was in something else that we read last week, but it specifically mentions the underworld. It specifically mentions, getting into what we've always kind of, was it 1313 that was going to be the underworld?
Yep. And I think one of the trailers or the little 30-second clip said, "Welcome to the underworld," or "This is
welcome to the underworld." Yep. So the idea of Crimson Dawn seems, that would be one you'd put money on. Like that would be a safer bet than a lot of the things that I have posited so far. I think Kira, while not as certain as Crimson Dawn, is absolutely in play.
Yep.
Because, and I made the mistake. I did the math wrong last weekend. I think it was on Pink Milk in the After Dark stream. I said something about having to age her up because I forgot that she wasn't sequel era and that this was only, 8 years after the Solo movie or somewhere in that range. So like they could absolutely have her show up and be in charge of Crimson Dawn still. And I haven't read those comics either, so I don't know how that would inform that in the show. But honestly, of most of the predictions I've seen, I think that one has a lot of weight to it.
Yeah, and I think it's how easy is it to fly her in for a day and a half, do some work in the screen and kind of set that up. This takes place. Maul is gone, so we won't see Maul from Crimson Dawn. So this would be the Kira age of Crimson Dawn. And maybe it's even Kira trying to make a deal with Boba. I think we're going to see a lot of that sort of Godfather, 5 families coming together kind of thing. And again, that kind of goes to my theory that this is setting up Boba Fett for that play for Mandalore, where he is trying to create his own army, his underworld army that could come from that. And you know what? Thinking out loud here, that kind of plays nicely to your concept of out of order stories, where maybe he's going to go meet with Kira, so here's a story about how what Kira owes him, and here's a story about what Cad Bane owes him, so bring in his piece. And so I think that's a real possibility, and I would love to see it. And I think that would really do a nice job of tying comics to Solo a Star Wars story, to Book of Boba Fett, to the Mandalorian. I think it would be a really nice overall connection there. I think. Well,
and it might even, we've heard for a lot of years now the outcry for another Solo movie.
Right.
You give somebody a tease of Kira, how much farther? Does that keep that hope alive? Does that indicate a lean towards a series? That could do any number of things. But let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If we're talking about, I love the Godfather angle, and we kind of get, the big dinner where he's sitting at the table with all the people, and, definitely has some Godfather vibes. The line that has been featured as prominently as anything else in the trailer so far is the Jabba ruled with fear, I intend to rule with respect.
Yep.
Do you buy that? Because I don't think I buy that.
I'm with you 100% on that. I think that is, I think that's sarcasm, because then they follow it up with the feel free to speak your mind or whatever that is, or speak freely, right?
Right. Speak freely.
And although the only thing that gives it credence is the fact that he does tend to stick to whatever that bounty hunter code is, that is still sort of, but I don't know. I think it's a possibility that, I guess when you're leading a crime family, you have to tell the different crime families what they want to hear. And so, and clearly, I think that's one of the other things is, Jabba's been gone for how many years? I guess
5 years.
Yeah, I guess it's been about 5 years. So how long has Bib Fortuna been on the throne, and did he earn it, and all the other things? So, it does feel like the Jabba vacuum is still playing a large role, and so. Hey, if I'm taking over a crime family, I'm going to figure out what people didn't like about that last guy and try to play on that, whether I plan to do it or not. But I think I'm kind of with you. I don't see him really leaning on respect too much. So
yeah, it's a tough one to gauge, because, like you said, at the end of Mandalorian, when he shows up, he honors his agreement with Din to protect the kid. So even when the kid is captured, it wasn't, I got my armor back, I'm good, peace out. Yeah. He said, no, we're going with you, because we, so there are those, but it's interesting in the story writing, because you're mixing old versions of Boba Fett with modern versions of Boba Fett, and how ruthless are you willing to make him be?
Right.
How, it's different, literal different decades of storytelling that have changed from what the concept may have been in, old novels, old comic books, what he was intended before, to what we get now, which is, there's nothing wrong with being a man of your honor and a man of your word, but it's just a weird mix for this character that maybe we're supposed to be unsure.
Right. Nope. I think you're spot on with that. And I think it would be really interesting to see him as that Godfather, but with kind of like that vicious streak. behind it. All right. So before we get to your next theory, the next Nick theory, I want to share this little little factoid about Boba Fett that I had found, that at one point in the development of Return of the Jedi, Lucas had plotted Boba Fett as the main villain of the story. He decided to go with the Emperor storyline, writing in 1981 upon deciding he was not going to be making a sequel trilogy. So he was like, I'm not going to do the sequel, so I'll bring the Emperor into this one. But Can you imagine Boba as the big bad? And
I hate to lean on the "it's poetry, it rhymes" thing, but we get in Last Jedi, we get the same thing with Phasma.
Yep.
We get the light setup of Phasma in Force Awakens. We get a little bit more Phasma in Last Jedi and the face-off with Finn, and she falls down the fire hole. But also it was, same thing. Probably at that point, they didn't know they were heading towards the Emperor, but we thought, maybe was it going to be Snoke at this point? The Snoke reveal with Kylo and that thing has happened. But it's that, again, just kind of interesting way that we've taken these helmeted characters who look really cool, and you have to wonder at what point in the story planning for the sequels was there a bigger role envisioned for Phasma like there was for Boba Fett. I love that stuff, and that's the kind of behind the scenes what if things that I can nerd out for hours, just going, gosh, but what if they did this? And,
what if they,
that series that I mentioned on Disney Plus, the Under the Helmet Boba Fett series, I loved that so much because, you get to see the concept stuff. You get to see, he shows up at the Marin County parade, that first, deal. And the extras or the stunt and production guys are like, you're tall enough, go get in that costume. We've got to go, do this thing.
Yep. Sort of how Mark Anthony Austin ended up in Return of the Jedi, the special editions. Yeah. You fit.
So,
yeah,
I like that. And it just kind of falls in line with, again, the traditions of Star Wars storytelling in a lot of ways.
Yep, 100%. Cool. All right, Nick, what other predictions might you have?
What if we got an opportunity to see the Armorer show up?
Oh, okay.
Because she disappeared when that covert, came apart. But to the best of our knowledge, she escaped and headed off, and she beat the hell out
of some stormtroopers, like
yes, she did.
Like Boba did.
And she was also on Tatooine, in a different part of Tatooine, as Tim says. But that would be a fun little nod for her to pop up in either some sort of armor repair way, or maybe some passing along of Mandalorian knowledge kind of way, especially if we head in the direction of the storytelling, like what you're talking about. If it all leads to Mandalore and who rules, she kind of has been a gatekeeper kind of character who's carrying the torch for the old way and some of that.
And I think I'll add to that, because as we're talking about the possibility of sort of 4 different Mandalorians all vying for the throne, we don't know what kind of Mandalorian Boba is. And I think one of the things that has been mentioned sort of in passing, and I'm actually surprised it hasn't been a bigger deal to people, is the fact that the Armorer wears a helmet with horns, which is very similar to those that were following Maul, which was a very traditional, very aggressive kind of, warmongering,
fanatical.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that would be also kind of an interesting foil to Din Djarin, who he's been following the extremism, but not sure why. And maybe if he sees that it is a little darker, and that it's not who he thinks he is, it might be able to turn Boba Fett back into a villain by the time you get to the end of that arc. And maybe I would love to see the Armorer, and I'd love to get some sort of insight as to who it is. I mean, there's been so many different theories as to who she is. It would be kind of cool to get her story.
Yeah, she would be one I think that would make sense to show up in some form or fashion.
Oh, that's cool. I can definitely see that. And you don't make a Black Series action figure out of somebody who's well, actually you do. But I mean, it's the fact that there's a Black Series Mithril, I think is that's why I don't do Black Series anymore.
I mean, our friend Paul Carson Teva himself has been in 2 different episodes, and he doesn't have a black series yet. So
it's just not right. It's just not right. All right, as we come down the home stretch, what other kind of what other theories might you have?
I don't know if the rest of these fall into theories as much as just things that I want to see.
Yeah, let's throw that out there.
I want Cobb Vanth to show up again, and I feel like there's a way for that to also happen. He's on Tatooine. Yeah, he doesn't have the armor anymore, and the armor. He wasn't a part of the exchange to get the armor back to Boba. Din had it after their, whole deal. But I could see there being some way for him to pop in. You want it to be a little bit more than a cameo, like, oh, hey, I just was passing through picking up power converters.
It would be kind of cool if Boba, in his effort to sort of take over Tatooine, has to call on the marshal of, what is it, Mos
Espa? Pelago.
To call on the marshal of Mos Pelgo to get him in line, and he walks in and the marshal's like, I know that armor.
That's right. I used to wear something just like that. And it could even be another. I think Din is going to play into this series. I don't think we're going to get through this without some Din involvement. There could be an episode where, along the lines of what you're saying, like Boba needs local help for something, and he calls Din on a holo transmission, and he says, I've got the guy for you. Contact this guy on the other side of the planet. He'll hook you up. Along those lines, I don't think we get Cobb back in the Boba armor, although that could tie into my Boba dies theory. What if Din gets Slave One, Cobb gets the armor back, and then in Mandalorian season 3, because we also kind of got that really intentional. Which, first of all, that was the first episode of season 2 last year.
Amazing, right?
It's probably my favorite episode from that whole season. Yeah. But there was a very intentional moment where they shake hands as they're parting ways, and he says something like, I hope to work with you again. And he says, count on it or whatever. Yeah. Like, that's the not Pavlov's gun. What's Chekhov's gun?
Chekhov's gun. Yep. Yep.
That's the Chekhov's handshake that I'm still waiting to come back in the next act.
That could very well be when he's sort of rustling up and talks to the marshal and says, I need something. I mean, it would be somewhat almost humorous if he's like, I know a Mandalorian who could help you out. And it's Din, because Din may not know that Boba's gone back to Tatooine.
Right.
Be funny.
Speaking of armor, it maybe in a flashback mode, it would be fun to see some sort of nod to the white prototype armor. Yeah. I don't know how they work that in, but that has always fascinated me as well.
Yep.
I know that's one of the helmets that you have hiding out behind you, but I don't know. I've always been fascinated by the prototype stuff, so it would be fun if maybe there was a flashback or a nod, or I think it's too much to expect somebody to wear that and that be a thing.
Well, maybe it comes as simply as maybe it ties into one of your other theories. Maybe we do see the armor and we see him replating his armor, and it's all white. That would be kind of cool. That's the kind of really subtle nod that I would love, just to see the Boba Fett armor in white, just sort of laid out on a table somewhere before it gets painted.
Well, and so here's what it needs to be. There was an episode of Knight Rider when I was a kid where Kit drove into acid or something. And when it came back out, it wasn't black anymore. And other than being able to talk, it didn't have all of its abilities. And so it was like a whole episode where the car was white and it wasn't. And then he got repainted black, and all of a sudden he had all of his car superpowers. So maybe, Boba in the white armor is just useless, and then he gets repainted and he's ready to go.
I like it. I can deal with
the best 80s connection stretch I could make. What else? I'm trying to see if I had anything else. I don't think I had anything else that was super, crazy. One other little thing that showed up at one point in season 2 of Mandalorian, Grief Karga talks about spending time in the Twi'lek healing baths.
Yes.
And I think that could be the scene we've seen of Boba with the regulator in his mouth underwater. Of course, we all kind of go to it's Bacta, and that's him recovering from the Sarlacc. But what if the Jennifer Beals character runs the Twi'lek healing baths, and he goes there undercover to go get, a treatment and find some information? Again, to me, that's just planting those little seeds along the way that they're pulling the threads on, that they're always so good at with this kind of storytelling. You talked about all the things we learned about Boba in the episode where he shows back up last season, his history, the armor, one of them was the mention of his chain code.
Yep.
And then we get chain codes fully explained in Bad Batch when the Empire is taking over and people are being assigned chain codes. You're like, oh, this is how that happened. Like,
yep. No, and I think that's one thing that they have been, that Filoni is phenomenal at, is, you know, planting something. And, you know, part of me is like, I don't think he plans to plan it. But he goes back and he's very aware of everything he's done, and he'll go back and he'll pull that up. So Twi'lek healing bath sounds kind of cheeky in the first episode of The Mandalorian, but yeah, it would be great because, you know, you get Jennifer Beals in there, and you're seeing a couple Twi'leks, and then there's also, of course, the Twi'lek who's seen in that one clip where the mayor welcomes you or whatever he says. And so Twi'leks are here, and it's interesting. He's not a very ugly male Twi'lek, which is very strange. Usually they're somewhat hideous.
A little bit gross.
Before we get to our last prediction, I want to share one more that we got, which I think would be kind of interesting to check out and comment on. We talked about a lot of it, but let me see if I can hit the right buttons here so I can share the right screen. So Imperial Rebel on Twitter said, we'll see Road to the Hutt, which of course is from Clone Wars, the movie, Prince Shizor, which I think is, let's talk about that for a second. Tamora Morrison back as Django. I said that before. And Jaster Muriel, that was the name I was trying to remember before, of the guy who sort of he took the Boba armor, or at least paraded as Boba. Of those on there, do you think we'll see Road of the Hutt or Prince Shizor? And I'll start by saying I think the mention of Shizor at the end of the last issue of the Bounty Hunter comic, which is the Crimson Reign one, means that he's out there. And correct. I think a Prince Shizor in live action would freak people out. And maybe it's a Crimson Reign or Crimson Dawn Shizor connection that ends up in this.
Again, I think you're exactly right. I think it has a lot more weight to it, knowing that he showed up in that most recent last panel of that comic book. And, you know, the word that we throw around all the time was that makes him canon now. And,
right. Yep.
You know, as opposed to it just being, you know, Dark Force Rising from before. And, you know, we all had the Power of the Force Shizor figure, you know, in the package, and
all the
energy blades,
video game,
or Shadows. That's it, not Dark Force Rising, Shadows. So he's canon now, and there are certainly opportunities for that to be something that could play. And again, it's Underworld, so I think that, you know, if you're placing your money on the top half of some things to bet on, that's safer than some of the other things that I've thrown out tonight. Yeah.
Nope, I would agree with that as well. So, all right, Nick, we're at the top of the hour, so I'm gonna throw out. This will be sort of a challenge for you and I, and we'll compare notes on the 30th. Actually, you and I will probably compare notes on the 29th at about 7:30 in the morning.
Exactly, way early in the morning.
But what do you think the opening scene is for Book of Boba Fett?
I think the opening scene is an expanded version of the scene that we got for the teaser at the end of Mando season 2. I think we get that footage used again, and maybe get something on either side of it as the opening scene.
Sort of like maybe the Fennec and him, kind of the scene that we did see in one of the teasers, them sort of laying in the dirt, kind of looking at the palace,
looking at the palace from a distance, coming up, taking out Bib, and assuming his seat on that throne, and then maybe throw to the intro as like a, you know, it's not to use something super timely, but we get the opening of Spider-Man Far From Home with the closing of No Way Home opened with the end of Far From Home.
Correct. Yep.
You know, the Times Square, and that's not a secret. That's not a spoiler.
Right.
But, you know, the reveal by Jonah Jameson and that whole thing, like, I think that's a great take that scene that everybody's familiar with and let's expand on it a little bit and let that be the opening of the first episode.
I think it also does a nice job too of making that direct connection. It'll start people where they're comfortable, and so I think that's wise. Well, keeping in mind that Rodriguez says that we've only seen from basically the first half of the first episode, we know that all that stuff is in there somewhere. So it's a good bet that's there. I have two, but since I'm going to have to put a stake in the ground, I'll come back to what my second one is because it's related to yours, but not exactly the same. But I think it starts with, I think the first shot, I'll go so far as to say the first shot will be Jabba's hand, Boba's hand coming out of the Sarlacc. We're going to see and watch him pulling himself out. His armor is all totally beaten up, and then perhaps we'll see somebody steal his armor so that it ends up with the Jawas, or like he has to take it off, and then something happens and he's got to run, and then maybe that's why we see him without the armor on in the in that one clip where it looks like he's going into Tashi Station without his armor. So somebody took his armor and
going in town to ask around. Hey, anybody been trying to sell you some armor?
Yeah. So
and that makes me think of too. And I don't know that it would fall. I don't know where it falls because I'm not good at comic books. But there's that famous comic book panel, isn't it, of his hand coming out of the Sarlacc pit. So that would be a great translate that to the in-universe real moment. Yeah,
which is something I think Marvel has done so well is, I'm not a huge comic fan, but I love going online after I see the movie and people say, in on page 18 of issue 64, that scene was there, and you look at them side by side and you're like, wow, that's really cool. So I'm going with we'll see his escape from the Sarlacc as the first scene, and you're saying we'll see the death of Bib Fortuna as the first scene.
Yeah, I think that little tease we got before gets expanded on to open the series.
Cool. So I'll give you my second one because this is now that I've said that, and it's sort of a bastardization of your idea, which I like your idea best. Honestly, I think yours is cool and it makes sense, and it's a good storytelling device in a world of people who aren't all sweaty nerds like us. You do have to kind of reset their expectation and
like literally, my dad called me last Friday night and was like, "Hey, is there a Boba Fett show coming on?" And I was like, "Oh my God, where have you been?
Where have you been? Like, more importantly, where have I been? Where have I been?"
Yeah.
That's the only.
Yeah, I would say the real question is what's wrong with me. But.
I think the other possibility is that it starts with Boba saving Fennec Shan's life, and they go to take his ship back from Jabba's palace, and that's because we see him in front of, we see both of them in front of Jabba's ship, or Boba and Jabba. It's too close together. In front of, it's standing in front of Boba's ship. So I think maybe there is they work together to get that ship because he had the ship before he had the armor. And, again, I still think, and I said this on one of my shows to one of my guests a couple of weeks ago, when Slave One flew across the sky in the tragedy, I just about lost it because I didn't expect him to. I knew he was. I felt like he was going to come back, but I didn't think it was going to come. I didn't know when. We saw him. It was a tease. Maybe it was a tease for something else because again, we didn't know Book of Boba Fett was coming back. But when we saw that ship fly across the sky, so for him to come and sorry, R2D2 is talking to me. So I think there's a possibility that the other scene is that direct connection to him saving Fennec in the desert. And he says, "Come on, I need you. We got to go get my ship." And that's where they go from there. So, so we have three possible opening scenes. And,
absolutely.
None of them are going to be right, which means they're going to open up with the Twi'lek healing baths or something. So
the foolish way that I've managed to sucker you into coming in and hanging out and talking about all this stuff tonight is that I am horribly bad at Star Wars predictions, and everything I've ever predicted has not happened. So
I am.
My track record is strong.
And honestly, I think maybe that's a good way to close our conversation is where we started, and that is, it is really actually super exciting that we know nothing about this show. Correct. We have no expectation. Again, completely. As I said, I said this after I walked out of No Way Home. I wish that we didn't see what we saw with Green Goblin and Doc Ock in the trailer. And I can say that even if you haven't seen the movie, you've seen the trailer.
Yeah,
you know they're in there. Can you imagine that scene without knowing that that's coming? You would have lost your mind.
We had said that before with with the Rise of Skywalker trailers and marketing.
Yeah.
Like, if you hadn't given me Palpatine, it would have been that much more powerful. If you hadn't given me, I don't remember what the other example was, but there's something else in that trailer that, it just would be something like even more of a wow. Like
all those ships at the end, if they hadn't shown
all the ships at the end,
Avengers on your left scene. Yep. That would have,
those little moments, like, and it didn't spoil the movie for me, but that would have been that much bigger of a wow if they hadn't done that.
Yep.
So again, it goes back to what we said up front, which is we don't know anything, we're wide open. We get to come in and watch it and mark off on our list all the things that weren't right, and then be excited to talk about the things that we couldn't have even begun to guess.
Well, and the nice thing too is it means that there's no expectations. Like, luckily, I keep mentioning No Way Home because it's such a phenomenon right now. They did it right. It didn't matter that you knew that. If the movie was mediocre and you didn't, and that was a surprise that would have made the movie. I mean, it's just like if they had shown Baby Yoda in the trailers, if they'd shown Grogu in trailers for Book of Boba or Mandalorian, it would have ruined what is still one of the best moments in Star Wars history for me. So I love that we're in this spot. I love that Rodriguez has said that the second half of the season is epic. I love that he says every episode has a surprise, which again, I think gives credence to your point that it's going to be 7 chapters, and chapter 2 is going to be Cad Bane, and chapter 3 is going to be Jabba the Hutt, and chapter 4 is going to be whatever. And I love that culminating in one big story for Boba.
And I love too that when we boil it down to its base, and I hope we get some good, like, I think you're like me. At the end of season 1 of Mandalorian, we got all of the what were the behind the scenes things called? The gallery episodes.
Gallery episodes, yep.
And so I was so excited for season 2 gallery episodes, and we got like 2 of them. We got the one that summarized the whole second season, and then we got the Luke one, and I ate every bit of it up.
Yep.
I hope we get those for Boba too. But one of the big things that came out of that is that in those 2 series, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are 2 Star Wars kids playing with toys in their sandbox.
100%.
And now we've added Robert Rodriguez to that mix, who is also a huge Star Wars fan. And so these 3 guys getting to have fun with Star Wars.
Yeah.
And we don't know about the fun they're going to have. Like, that's all I need to know. Like, I really, you had me at these 3 guys get to do it.
Yeah. And I've said it before. One of the things I loved about the gallery was watching Dave Filoni be the nerd at the table. Like, everybody, you have Taika Waititi, and you've got Jon Favreau, these guys who've made just remarkable films. Yeah. And then you have Dave as the actually guy, like, well, a lightsaber is actually only 1.2 meters long, and you can't, but I think that's why, and
that's
this
why
is
it works.
This is the right way to end this conversation. This is why it's working. It's because there is enough, and I do think people who did not like Cameo of the Week on Bad Batch are going to hate this show, because I think it's going to be, remember this guy and remember this connection, and we're going to tell you that guy's story, and I think that's going to work. But I think because Filoni is such a student of the lore, it's going to be done appropriately. Like, I feel like Favreau is like, hey, in this series, episode, we're going to have him, he's going to hijack a ship, and Filoni will go, well, if we had Dash Rendar in there and he hijacked his ship, and Favreau is probably like, cool, whatever, make it work.
Yeah, and you said it, and I'm going to make it look really cool.
Right. I think that's the way it's going to work. I think that's why this series is so exciting to everybody, from your dad and my dad to you and me, who are just like, I'm standing at the buffet and I'm going to eat all of it.
Everybody.
I'm so excited about it.
And what do you think? Obviously, I'm sure they talk. There's no way they don't talk. over the course of this process and developing this, Dave Filoni picks up the phone and he calls George to be like, hey, this is what I'm working on. This is what I'm doing. Like, what do you think George thinks about his he is his protege. He's the guy that came and was at his feet. He was the one, he received the mantle, whether officially or unofficially or not.
Yep.
But like, wouldn't you love to be the fly on the wall to hear Dave Filoni telling George, this is what I'm doing with the Boba Fett series, and this is what we're going to look, and to have George go, oh, I really like that. Or, I always intended for him to be this other. Okay, well, I'm going to plug that in. Like, I mean,
and as a writer, and I don't care how independent you are, and it's funny, like as somebody who's written fiction, and when I talk to somebody who I really respect, and they say something like, the story's great, but have you thought about adding blah? You're like, kind of feel like I got it. So I do feel like you're right. I think that there is George Lucas fingerprints all over this, not just because Filoni learned under him, but I bet you they've had conversations, even just over a cup of coffee. And he's like, well, if you're going to bring that guy in, maybe I always thought that he should be a Rhodian. And it's like, okay. Yep. That's cool. Do that. Yep. Yeah. And I that's why this is such an exciting series. I guess the last question is, do you feel like this, I worry because everything's been so good, right? Mandalorian was so good. Even the episodes that people called filler, it's just like, shut up. There's no such thing as filler in Filoni.
It doesn't work that way.
It comes back, right? Are you worried at all about if this series will live up to the expectation we just put high expectation on it tonight?
I'm not. I'm really not. And I'm not always like that about things. I went into Spider-Man going, I've heard it's phenomenal, but is it though?
Yeah.
I'm a little bit of a natural skeptic as a general rule.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that I have overinflated expectations for Boba Fett, but when it comes down to it, like, I'm just really excited, and I'm really excited to just watch it, absorb it, and be excited about it, because I also, like you, as much as I love Star Wars, I get exhausted with us bitching and complaining and like, okay, that one wasn't for me. That's fine. That one might have been for Pete, or that one might have been for Jack, or that one might have been for, whoever. So I'm really excited just to watch it and have fun and go, oh man, I never even thought they might do that.
Yep. And I think that's the thing to remember. And I love that. And I think we need to remember that when we go into it. Like, I've said it before. When I heard about The Mandalorian, I was like, okay, it'll probably be cool. And honestly, when I heard about Kenobi, I was like, do I need that story? I don't think I do. And honestly, Andor, I was like, no, I don't want it. But I know within 4 minutes, I'm going to be like, I'm so glad we got it. We got it. So even with Bad Batch, even with some of the slow parts of Bad Batch, it was still just, I'm in Star Wars for 30 minutes. Shut up. This is great. I'm happy.
The rest of the world can wait.
That's right. Exactly. Well, Nick, thanks, man. This was, I can't think of a better way to get psyched up about watching a new Star Wars than talking about it with a good friend who is just as nerdy about it as I am. For people who are listening and may not have heard of you, where can people find you online?
You can find Podcast of the Wills on all of your different social medias at WillsPod. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. There's a TikTok that I don't use because I'm pretty much too old for TikTok.
It's a law. You're not allowed there.
We also have our YouTube page that you can find if you search Podcast of the Wills. We'd love for you to subscribe and check us out. We are off for a couple of weeks because it's the end of the year. I'm spending the next couple of weeks tweeting out favorites from over the course of this last year. Cause like you said, we had, I think I did 43 shows. I started a little bit later than you did this year. But every Sunday night we hang out, we talk Star Wars. We're going to start the new year with some exciting guests, and we're going to lean back into our canon studies episodes where we kind of do, like I said, it's a Bible study, but instead of the Bible, it's Star Wars. So check us out on WillsPod everywhere. And if I can throw out one super selfish, holiday plug, wherever you live, go donate blood. It's an important time of year where things are slow and accidents still happen and emergencies still happen and hospitals are overwhelmed right now. And one of the easiest things that you can do is go donate blood at your local community blood center. One regular blood donation has the potential to save 3 lives, and it's a big deal. So during the holidays, give the gift of a pint of your blood. They'll give you a T-shirt. They'll give you, something for thanking you for
cookies
it.
and orange juice. I mean,
cookies and orange juice, whatever you need. Yeah. So that's selfish because I work for a community blood center, but it's this time of year where, again, all of our hospitals with COVID and all that stuff are super overwhelmed. So go help somebody out. Go help save a life.
That's great. Thank you, Nick. And, seriously, if you listen to my show on Tuesdays or Saturdays for Disturbances in the Force, on Sundays, you got to go check it out. It's such a great conversation. And I'm excited that you're going back to this sort of studying, the text of Star Wars, because it's so, you get into some great things. And I know who some of your guests coming up are, and I'm excited. I can't wait for it. So, Nick, thank you so much, man. And I can't wait to see how wrong we were with these predictions. It's going to be great.
Without a doubt.
All right, man. See ya.